So it does say you shall conduct and complete.
Doesn't say you should, right? It doesn't say you should.
I know. I hate those. You should do this. If I see a policy that says you should do this, I'm always like, I wouldn't. Just because it's optional.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me is Donna Grindle from Carton. What's up, Donna?
Not me.
Not you.
I'm flat today.
Yep. You got another trip planned coming up, don't you?
Yeah, I'm going to the HSCC, the Health Sector Coordinating Council, all hands meeting next week. Yeah. Handsy.
Yeah.
In San Diego. So 3 glorious days of talking cybersecurity and healthcare.
You should come out with a lot of stuff. Oh, yeah.
You know, just enough nerdy stuff to, glaze me over and make me not make sense when I'm telling about it. and then I'll merge 3 things together. So,
yeah. I expect you to be blowing me up all week with messages. Listen to this. Listen.
Well, you can do the virtual one. You better do that because I won't remember.
Yeah. All right. So today's topic is we finally, after talking about it for a while, we've been talking about the security risk assessment violations and how OCR is going to start prioritizing these. And guess what? We got the first one. First one in the bag. Now the ball is rolling. So we are going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk about what they say about it. And I think there's some good information that comes out of this. As always, we break these down. We take a look at what they said. Sometimes we take a look at what they didn't say. And then we pull some information out of it that is extremely helpful. And today, because we're going through this, there's actually kind of a checklist for your SRA that pulls out of this.
Yeah, well, kind of.
Look,
if you're always wanting to be a checklist that somebody asks you for one, you can give them this, but you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, we'll get into that. And before we do, we want to say thanks to those who listen and support the show. You can always find out more about me or Donna from helpmewithhipaa.com, or you can get Donna at cardinhq.com. You can find me at HIPAAformsps.com. All right, so let's dive right into our first SRA violation settlement and talk about it, because this came from something that happened back in May of 2022.
That's a pretty quick turnaround right there.
It is. It really is.
They already had that in their pocket.
It's like as soon as the first one comes in, we're going to grab it, push it to the top.
Yeah. Well, they announced the initiative in March I want to say. Mm-hmm. Announced the initiative March, April timeframe. They signed this settlement in July. So it had to have been well down the path, because I can tell you how they work. So May 2022, they reported it. Mm-hmm. A ransomware attack. Bryan County Ambulance Authority, BCAA, in Oklahoma. And they're not big, but 14,273 patients were involved in the attack. Mm-hmm. And we know anything 500 or more, you're going to have investigations. They're going to look into it. What caused the data breach? That's just the way it works. Mm-hmm. It's always been that way. And, if they're going to ask you for documentation about what you had in place to prevent whatever happened from happening, mm-hmm. that you were supposed to have in place. You send them the documentation, you answer their questions about it, and then they say, okay, tighten this up or tighten that up. You're like, woo, moving mm-hmm. on. Sometimes you have to go around 2 or 3 times to do documentation. But If you don't have the right stuff, they will ask you to try again until you go, yeah, I got nothing. And this kind of, it looks like the investigation found they had failed to conduct, and I noted this phrase, compliant risk analysis. Basically saying you've done something, but not the right thing. So, yeah.
That is interesting, though, because, typically they say you failed to do an accurate and thorough risk analysis, which to me still says that you had something, but I guess maybe not.
Well, the fact is, an accurate and thorough, you could make the argument, I suppose, that yours is whatever it is accurate and thorough. But then the minute they start going, well, you didn't include this, and this, you got, okay, it's not. So they're saying you may have done something, but it wasn't a compliant risk analysis. And it's so many people are doing things that they think are risk analysis. They're not.
Yeah. I just know that for a long time, we and those in our circles have tried to stay away from using that word, compliant.
Yeah, compliant.
Because now it opens up what is compliant as far as a risk analysis? And can you certify that I have a compliant risk analysis?
And there's the rub right there.
Yeah, exactly. So now, are we going to open some doors for people to take this and run the wrong direction with it? I don't know, man.
Yeah. But it is, and when you're working with lawyers, you got to pay attention to phrases and what words they use. So, I did note that it was different. I mean, it may have been out there before, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, I've never seen it either.
So, but you can hit our quote because it hits right to the...
Yeah, so the OCR director is quoted as saying, failure to conduct a HIPAA security rule risk analysis leaves healthcare entities vulnerable to cyber attacks such as ransomware. Knowing where your EPHI is held and the security measures in place to protect that information is essential for compliance with HIPAA. OCR created the Risk Analysis Initiative to increase the number of completed investigations and highlight the need for more attention and better compliance with this security rule requirement.
So, it's kind of like, okay, we're putting it out here. If you're already in an investigation, it's not a lot, it's not news to you, but do it now. That's what he's saying. So the settlement was $90,000 and a 3-year corrective action plan.
That sort of tells you that they probably didn't have much.
Yeah. Because they're clearly small. To $90,000 is a lot if you're small,
right?
And the 3-year corrective action plan is probably what they had to do to get it down to 90,000. And there's all the standard language. You've got to do SRA with the risk management with written policies and procedures along with. And I thought this was interesting because I have noticed recently this being said specifically, unlike before. Training its workforce on its HIPAA policies and procedures. They keep going back to training your workforce on your environment. And, I think it's got to do with so many people that just do very generic HIPAA training every year. I answer 3 questions, I'm done, click, click, click. HIPAA training.
I actually talked to somebody over the weekend, and they said they just had done their HIPAA training. And I said, so was it like 30 minutes? And they were like, yeah, actually it was like 30 minutes. I said, do you know how long our HIPAA boot camp is for people who get that kind of training? She's like, I don't know, what, couple hours. I'm like, try 4 days.
And it's intense. And people are like, there's so much information.
4 days worth of training. But I won't say who this person worked for. But I will say you probably pay taxes into the entity. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Well, it's always a interesting scenario when you start discussing workforce training. Because some people are like, that just costs me money.
Yeah. Well, they confuse it because I usually get people to say, we need to do workforce training or security awareness training. They use them interchangeably, and they're looking for some kind of something that just sends them a link to go do a 5-minute training, once a month or something like that. But again, what this says is they should also be trained, not instead of be trained, but also be trained on their very own HIPAA policies and procedures, which you and I know there's a high likelihood they probably don't have a lot of the HIPAA policies and procedures.
Well, and if they do, they don't follow them. I'm going through assessments now where 2 different groups gave me 2 different versions of policies and procedures in the same company. That one's interesting because I'm like, but now do you follow either one? So, yeah, it's an interesting quandary there. But so, those are what we consider the normal things that you would have in your HIPAA program, which we'll get to our checklist in a little bit. But let's go through what OCR says, because remember, their failure was a compliant risk analysis. So then when they're putting in their corrective action plan, you would think that that's kind of telling you how to be compliant.
Yeah.
One would think.
You'd think so.
Yeah. So it does say you shall conduct and complete.
Doesn't say you should, right? It doesn't say you should.
I know. I hate those. You should do this. If I see a policy that says you should do this, I'm always like, I wouldn't, because it's optional. But an accurate and thorough analysis of security risk and vulnerabilities that incorporates. Now, here is the point that we keep trying to get across, and people are getting frustrated when we're trying to explain it. But I don't want to do this. I know. But you gotta. It needs to include all electronic equipment. Huh.
Wow. Even like your typewriter?
It didn't say electric equipment. Data systems, programs, and applications that are controlled, administered, owned, or shared by BCAA that contain, store, transmit, or receive EPHI.
Oh, that's different.
Huh. Because people don't get the maintain part.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that argument sometimes. We don't maintain PHI. I'm like, yeah, but the systems that you're maintaining contain PHI. Right, but we can't see it. We
don't touch it.
Yeah, we can't see it. We can't touch it. We can't open it. Which, I mean...
Can you ruin the integrity and make it never be available again? Because there's those two. CIA. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So, yeah, that's my cremate. Crecon mate. I don't know. I'll have to figure out
They're messing you up. I
know, right? But we have, it's important. So we started with all electronic equipment, then data systems. So anything that has data, then the programs themselves, and then the applications.
So what's the difference between a program and an application?
Well, you can have a application in the web, that runs in a browser. The browser is the program. The application is what's running in there.
Gotcha.
On mobile devices, there's an app for that. It's the application.
Right.
And we're going through that. I just answered a question today because we have, like I've mentioned, up the game on making sure that we have our inventories done, a lot more intense. Mm-hmm. So I broke them out a little further that, you have like your desktops and, laptops and that kind of stuff and mobile devices and all of that. And then you have your network infrastructure. You got to know what you got there. And then you have your software, which is what's running on all the systems. And then you have your SaaS applications, mm-hmm. which are all of your cloud-based applications that you're managing and you're doing things with and potentially putting PHI in. But, most people are doing EHRs in the cloud and stuff like that now. So those applications I need to account for. So we got to account for all of those as well. And then we got to know how everything works together. So, everybody's like, so it was basically the same question you just asked. It's like, mm-hmm. well, for example, Microsoft 365, where does mm-hmm. it go? And I'm like, well, part of it goes on the SaaS thing. That's your 365 where everything can live up there. And then if you are running the desktop applications, then those are software.
Mm-hmm. The programs.
But you have both.
Right. So here's the challenge, and this is why I wanted to go down this rabbit hole with you, is that mm-hmm. if a client reaches out to me and says, can you give me a list of all my applications or a list of all my software, then I can pull that list. But what it's doing is it's looking at what's installed on that computer. It doesn't know what SaaS applications you have.
That is correct. And that is what is really pushing the envelope, because it's like, well, I just tell IT to get me a list, but IT, you don't support the SaaS applications. And many of your clients have SaaS applications you never even know about, you don't touch.
That is correct.
So everybody had programs on their computers, but now you don't.
Mm-mm. Yeah, and there's no way for me or my team to know what all you're using. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those things. I mean, sometimes we find out companies don't even know what other employees are using.
Yeah.
So yep. That's, this, we've seen this before. I talked to the C-suite folks and they're like, no, we don't use Dropbox. And then talk to the people down on the lower rungs and they're like, oh, we use our Dropbox every day. It's like, okay.
Yep. It happens all the time.
Uh-huh. But
no, we don't do that.
I just want to bring that up though. If you ask IT for that list, it's not going to get you everything you're looking for here.
No. And that is one of the things people are struggling with, but then they're, stepping back and going, wow, I hadn't really looked at it this intently, because we'd be like, okay, the EHR is in the cloud. Now I'm saying, tell me every SaaS application you're using, every single one, so that we can make sure, because now, it was, even 3 years ago, that list wasn't that big. Now it's huge.
Yeah. I think that is kind of a benefit of having a password manager, because you could audit that password manager to see, what credentials you have to wear and what you still use. I know I'm currently going through and editing out a lot of the sites I don't use anymore out of my password manager just to clean it up some.
Yeah.
And there are so many. I'm like, there's a good many of them that I don't even have the ability to log into because they've already just closed out my account.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah. But
we're going through the exact same thing, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, but just trying to clean all that mess up. But it's a lot, and it's typically more than people realize. If you're like me, your bookmarks bar on the top of your browser is just slam packed full, and I use all of them.
Well, we use GitToby because then we can share the links properly and all of that. But it's cool. But yes, it is a very important thing to understand that you have programs and then you have applications, and they are not the same as what your IT folks can pull as far as on the equipment. And the other issue is if there's somehow a device you're not managing, you're not going to know that software either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you can't just say, well, you know, the minute I see, well, IT just takes care of that, you know, there's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. A good example of that is we have a few clients who use Chromebooks, and we don't manage the Chromebooks. And so anything they do on there, we don't have any idea what they're doing, any availability to look at it. We just don't monitor that particular application. So we try to limit that, but these folks that I'm talking about luckily aren't in healthcare, but you're going to have that, you know, do they have mobile device management? And if they do, what is it able to see and do? Yep. Because unfortunately, mobile device management has become one of those things where you can use the same term and mean different things. There's a wide range of what MDM actually is able to do. So you have to ask those questions.
Yeah, that gets nerve-wracking, and that's its own little rabbit hole.
Yes.
So, all right, so you're going to conduct a complete, accurate, and thorough analysis of the security risks and vulnerabilities that includes that list. So your electronic equipment, your data systems, your programs, your applications. As part of this, you will complete an inventory of all of those things.
Okay.
So you have an inventory of all of those things.
Right.
But it says inventory of electronic equipment, data systems, off-site data storage facilities, like cloud providers, I guess, and applications that contain or store. Let's just go ahead and put both in there now. EPHI.
Right.
And that will then be incorporated.
And if you're backing up that data anywhere, you're storing it. So just so you know.
Yeah.
All right. So you have to have the list, and then you have to know what are the security risks and vulnerabilities of that list. All the things on the list. That's a heavier lift, right?
Yeah, because you know that at the security risk and vulnerabilities is what you're going through after you have the list, and that is not just we went through and did our HIPAA gap analysis, so we're good. That's usually what people do. Is they'll run some scan and they'll say, yeah, look, we're good. Here's all of our stuff. And that's not going to cut it. It just won't. So if you're tracking it properly, but even then, now I've got it all and I know where everything is. Well, what could happen to it? And, if you're only saying, well, ransomware and email compromise and the building blows up, whatever, the computers, we lose everything or whatever it is. If that's all you're including in your risks and vulnerabilities, you're missing out. It needs to include things like unpatched software and disgruntled employees and, not terminating employees properly. Those are all your risks. And then you go and do policies and procedures to mitigate those risks. Or you say, I'm here in Georgia. I'm not going to worry about an earthquake. I'm going to live on the edge, earthquake-wise. But it's on my mind because I'm going to San Diego. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so, you got to review all of that. So then you have a list of all the things that you're going to make sure you do something to prevent. And in doing something, you're either handling it internally, and there's some things where you're just not going to allow it. We're going to block all connections of Chromebooks, or we won't, allow, there's a bazillion ways that you can just say, I'm not going to allow that to even participate in my world. I'm going to just block it and say, we don't collect that data. We don't, whatever. Or I'm going to manage it internally, or I'm going to outsource the work for managing it, not the risk, the work for managing it. I'm going to get assistance in managing my risk. I don't transfer the risk. In fact, I reduce one risk and increase another.
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
Yeah. You got to realize that's what you're doing along the way. And then once you decide what you're going to do, then the question is, how you doing with that? Because that then tells you all the things you got to go fix.
Right.
That's it. But I did notice this statement after the SRA always follows with, you're going to have a risk management plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
The risk management plan shall include, and this is the part that made me go back and read it a couple of times, a process and timeline for BCAA's implementation, evaluation, and revision of its risk remediation activities. Yeah.
So which is another thing. And when you going to do it? How you going to do it and when you going to do it?
That's another thing we run into trouble with is we come up with this list and that's, okay, let's review your risk management plan. And, you need to do these things. We think you can finish this. This is a priority. So you should finish it this quarter. These you could finish next quarter because they're going to build on, and we work it out. And then we're saying, okay, you look at the timeline. You look at the, and figure out how you're going to go about doing these things. Because most of them are like project level with us. It's not like an individual down in the notes in, the details in the risk management stuff. You'll see the individual item. But when you're looking at the master report, it makes people glaze over. So, anyway, and in there, we're saying, here's your timeline. And that you should review this either weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly, no less than quarterly. Don't be reviewing it once a year. No. Mm-hmm. It should be on a constant review cycle to make sure those projects are being completed. And as things change, update your risk analysis to make sure you don't need to add things to your risk management plan. It's a living document. And, you just, once you finish one and you seal it, you make a copy and start the new one. That's it. So anyway, that, then it goes into, well, you also have to, you also, the training, the written policies and procedures, all of that kind of stuff. And there's timelines on all of that they have to do under the cap. So that's their 3-year plan. And every year they'll have to provide all this stuff showing they're doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're reviewing their policies and procedures and maintaining them. Interesting. So, indeed. Yeah. So we'll get to here's our cool little bonus. Because they do say, OCR tells us in their announcement email, OCR recommends healthcare providers, health plans, healthcare clearinghouses, and business associates that are covered by HIPAA take the following steps to mitigate or prevent cyber threats.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go through the list.
All right.
I don't know. I just think this is as close to a checklist you should ever have, I believe. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Hit some of them.
All right. So the first one here is to review all vendor and contractor relationships to ensure business associate agreements are in place as appropriate and address breach security incident obligations. So, yes. Yeah. So first of all, should you even have a BAA in place, not just hand them out to everybody? Because we still had that problem that people will come up to us and we need a BAA with you. And I'm like, what do you do? And they'll say, just as an example, we run a med spa. Okay. Do you take insurance? No. Okay, we're done. you don't need a BAA with me.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but we have one with everybody else. And I'm like, you got a mess.
You got issues there.
Yeah. So, then I have to go through the whole thing of, I'm not telling you that you don't have to do the security, because you do. You just don't have to follow HIPAA, but there are other things you do need to follow, and there are other things you need to do. And you can still follow the guidance of HIPAA, but let's not fool yourself in thinking that you fall under HIPAA. You don't want to take any more liability on than you have to.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that. and review all vendor and contractor relationships.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got this temporary worker. Okay, wait. Okay, back up. That's a contractor. How are they classified? How are they managed? What goes there? And we'll say, give us your list of vendors. And they'll say, well, here's our BAs. And actually, they usually say, here are our BAAs. No, it's your BAs. But I don't want to see that. I want to see all of your vendors and see that you've evaluated whether or not they need a BAA. That's what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
In your risk analysis process, we go through that just to, look for that. And then you went through just recently with a vendor.
Going through it now.
Yeah. On this breach and security incident obligations. You go through this often.
Yeah. And I always take the same path I tell other people, like, let's figure this out before we even go down the path of, are we going to do business together? And so that's what we're doing. I'm not signing anything else until I first sign the BAA, because if we can't get that figured out, there's no sense in going any further.
Yeah. Most people are like, the BAA is informal and you don't have to worry about it, which is why we have so many problems.
Mm-hmm. I think. Yep. So I'm talking to another large vendor, which again, not getting paid for. I'm tired of doing these large vendors and not getting paid.
I hear you.
But I tend to point these people in the right direction. And I can recall all the way back to like 2012, 2013, pointing a lot of these IT vendors toward HIPAA. And they were like, HIPAA doesn't apply to us. I'm like, oh, yeah, it does now. In 2013, it started. And Don and I were the first ones that I know of that were really pointing people in the IT industry toward HIPAA. Everybody else was saying, it doesn't apply to us. Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm. Had a lot of arguments.
Yeah. So, going through this right now, and this is very common that people will have things within their business associate agreement about how they're going to notify on security incidents and things like that. And I choose to have some different wording around that just so it makes more sense.
Yeah. Because if you word it in this default way that a lot of these are, you should be getting notifications every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, no. And so I love doing this because, you talk to somebody, and of course you're always talking to a salesperson first. And so you have to get them hopefully to get you up the ladder a little bit.
Yeah.
But I just say, look, this is in your business associate contract. I call it agreement. Sometimes I call it a contract because it seems to ring differently for folks. A contract? What? This is a contract? Yes, your BAA is a contract. And I'll say, look, if you're not going to notify me every single time you have a security incident attempt, then you're going to violate your own business associate agreement contract here. And they're like, well, no, we're not going to notify you every single time. I'm like, great. So then you violated it. Or we can figure out how we're going to proceed so that you don't violate it, but you're also not sending me 10,000 things to review every day.
Uh-huh.
So, and that's just kind of a pro tip that most people don't do. And a lot of folks, even some big companies, violate that. I went back and forth, and Donna helped me with this with Barracuda Networks on changing their business associate agreement. And after talking to multiple attorneys, they refused to change it. And after I pointed out to them multiple times, you are in direct violation of your own business associate agreement. I think I even went to OCR and asked them about it. I didn't use names. I was just hypothetically.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, no, they're in a constant state of breaching their own BAA contract. I'm like, that's what I thought. But anyway, they just still decided they weren't going to change it. And they're like, no, we're not going to send you all these notifications. And yes, we're going to leave it in the contract. I'm like, then you breached your own contract.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay.
Everybody does it. Everybody does it. Don't you know that'll be it?
Yeah. Of the 4,000 MSPs we have, you're the only troublemaker.
Well, that goes without saying. So.
Yeah.
All right. So the next thing.
Integrate your risk analysis and risk management into business processes regularly. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is not a project you do once a year.
No.
This should be just part of your work.
Yep.
Yep, it is.
It's how we do business. It's the culture.
Yeah.
It's how we do things.
I think part of it is, like we always, the joke about you do a security risk analysis every time you need to tell your wife something. We do these all the time. We just don't write them down.
Yeah, we do.
And maintain them. You're doing the work. All you need to do is write it down. Just write it down.
Well,
take notes of a meeting,
Yeah. Yeah. My wife would tell you that I do the risk analysis, but I just don't follow the action plan.
Yeah. Your risk management plan is ignored.
It's just like, do it anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Third one here. Ensure audit controls are in place to record and examine information system activity.
Yes. And that goes with the next one. Go ahead and read it too.
Implement regular review of information system activity.
So we got to have things in place that are making sure it's going out there. Don't turn it off. And then actually pay attention to the alerts.
Yep. Record it, examine it, review it. And wow. And this is one, we talk about this every time it comes up.
Very hard.
It's very hard to do. One of these days I want to be able to say, this is not that bad to do anymore. But it is. It's very hard to do. And it goes back oftentimes to our previous conversations about programs and applications, because you can't always look at the system activity of everything you're doing from an IT standpoint. Like if you're asking me to do that, then it highly depends on what tools I have in place and where I have them in place. Because I might be able to look at your system activity of your server and your PCs, but I might not know what kind of activity you're doing within your SaaS applications.
Right. So you have to question that. You go back to, who's monitoring this on your list. You add it to your inventory list. Who's monitoring this? Who's paying attention? Who's getting the email notifications?
Yeah. Who's zooming who?
Yeah. I'll tell you, we get those SIM notifications all the time for crap we're doing in Google Workspace.
I know, I get them too.
Yeah, I did that, and I meant to do it. It'll nut those things up pretty bad when you are writing something and showing examples of bad passwords and saying the word password and putting the actual examples of passwords in the document, and then you store it and it's like, oh my God, you got passwords stored.
Yeah. At least you know it works, right?
No. It's awesome. All right. The next one is easy. You should be doing it.
Yeah. MFA. So making sure you have MFA to ensure only authorized users are accessing ePHI.
Now, an interesting thing here is that many of these vendors don't necessarily have a solid MFA solution integrated. And that, I think, is going to need to be dealt with post haste, because they're like, well, it's not on our certified EHR list that we have to do it, so we don't do it. Yeah, I don't, we're going to get to that next year. They said 2 years ago. It's always something, but if it doesn't you got to force that to the top.
Yep. Nope. MFA, put that on everything.
Everything you can.
Put it on everything. Next one, encrypt ePHI to guard against unauthorized access to ePHI.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do we need to talk about encryption, I guess, again?
We can throw it out there real quick.
Yeah. So if it's encrypted, you have to ask the question, is it encrypted in transit? Is it encrypted at rest? Is it open and you're using it? Because then it's not encrypted while you're using it. So you need to have some level of understanding of what encryption is and how it's functioning around your ePHI. Because just because it's encrypted doesn't mean it's protected.
Very good. So you need to understand what encryption is doing for you.
Yeah. And when it's doing it. So it's like, I got locks on my house, but if the doors are open or people are walking in, the locks aren't functioning.
Nah. Doors are open.
Go ahead.
Get
yourself in trouble. Get yourself in trouble.
There it goes.
Call back to like episode, what is it, 4?
3, 4, something like that.
All right. The next one, incorporate lessons learned from incidents into the overall security management process. Okay. I like that. Not only do I like incorporating lessons I learned internally, I like to incorporate lessons I learned from the Help Me with HIPAA podcast.
Well, that's our earlier this year. We're like, be on the lookout. Always look for things that you should go, learn somebody else's lesson and apply it to yours. But the other part of this is an incident isn't a breach. You don't have to have a major data breach to have an incident. I can have a security incident where somebody emailed something where they shouldn't and we have to go through it, or somebody shared their login and we caught them doing that. We need to deal with that. Those are incidents.
Mm-hmm.
Something went wrong. We evaluate what went wrong, and then we write it down that we did it, we saw it, we saw it, we went, whatever it is. But it is important to understand, because people are like, oh, yeah, I don't have anything to report. Oh, so you've never mailed a claim or EOB to the wrong patient? Oh, yeah, we do that all the time. Well, there you go. You should be correcting every there's a process you should follow anytime that happens.
Yeah, should be writing all that up.
Uh-huh. All right, and then finally, to loop back around.
Yeah. Provide training specific to organization and job responsibilities on a regular basis. Reinforce workforce members' critical role in protecting privacy and security.
Huh.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's what we said.
Yeah, and this one's not just, specific to the organization, but also specific to their job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, the
roles and responsibilities.
The trigger here is regular basis. Like, can you define regular basis?
Well, are your people following the training that you give them? No, then it's not regular enough.
It's not. That's exactly right. If it's not changing behavior, then it's not regular enough.
Yeah. If it's not motivating the behavior change, it's not enough.
Mm-hmm. I mean, think about, when you're raising your kids and they did something stupid, you didn't, you let them keep doing something stupid for months. And then, I'm going to pop you. I'm going to put you on restriction. And then they keep doing it for months. And then you're going to put them on restriction again.
It's a loop. It's a loop. So it's just constant reminders of what you should be doing. And if something goes wrong, use it as a teaching moment.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it.
All right. There you go. There's your kinda-sorta checklist to go by, as well as the first SRA initiative settlement. So I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of these coming down. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Who knows? Roll the dice. All right.
All right, folks, that's our show for today. Thanks for listening. Be sure to share this out. We appreciate it. And hey, leave us a rating and review. We love those. And remember, for Donna and myself, that HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
Help me with HIPAA. Let's get it right. Protect your patients day and night. Donna and David, the experts on your side. Help me with HIPAA. Let's get it right. You've You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.